Alabama shuts out LSU tonight, 29-0.
And the Dogs have won another division crown. Georgia will play in Atlanta on SEC Championship Saturday.
Flips it right into the hands of Brendan Watson. Watson headed down the sidelines. Still going. Wolverines at 6.
I can't wait for Mike.
Come on.
Book a great fake, and they will not touch him. Touchdown, Notre Dame. Right up the middle, Feaster. Tavian Feaster. Feasting, eating, touchdown, Tigers.
It's the college football playoff rankings reaction show. Mike Golic Jr., I'm Jason Fitz. We have a special guest host every single week. This week, Gary Streisky joining us.
Yeah.
Gary, for those of you keeping track at home, Gary's feet touch the ground. Continuing the
They do,
trend
yeah.
of guest hosts whose feet touch the ground while mine still do not.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's probably not going to get any better as the weeks go on. I just want you to downgrade expectations. I don't want this to keep hurting you.
I think it's because the couch is particularly deep, not because I'm short.
Sure.
Thank you.
We'll go with that. I flipped the cushions for you this week, man. I tried to give you more support to better your chances, and now that it's failed, I'm just going to give up.
Yeah, give up. You guys are used to seeing us every single week as the playoff rankings come out from 8 to 9, but this week, a little different. Obviously, some basketball going on. The committee's putting the rankings out a little later, so we're doing things a little different. We're going to set up, we're going to give you a little anticipation, and then we'll get to the reaction as soon as we get the rankings. You can join in on the conversation. It's hashtag rankings reaction to be a part of the fun. Also, while we add to our entourage here, Mike Foss is in the kitchen hanging out. Mike is he's producer extraordinaire, the great brain behind this show, and we decided
chopping down a tree too in the flannel.
Yeah.
He does look very lumberjacky.
Yes.
You're
Yeah.
very
Looks good.
He
Mike
is
Very strong.
He is in the kitchen.
Very strong.
Hams everywhere.
People don't know that.
Yeah.
Very strong.
Mike actually has an impressive group of workout videos where he lifts his children for workouts.
Yeah, it seems wholly irresponsible, by the way.
No, they like it. I think.
I mean, it's not a question of them liking it as much as is it a good idea to do with them?
It's a good question that I won't answer live on camera.
Fair enough. All right. I would not incriminate myself either. Job well done.
So we're going to get you set up as we get ready. And look, let's just start with the thing everybody's got on their mind. I think we were reminded on Saturday, staggering statement, Alabama is good at football. And I have to say this loudly. I was not surprised in any way, shape, or form by the destruction of LSU. I don't think most of us were surprised. In some sort of altruistic society, everybody wanted it to be beautiful and wonderful, that somehow, some way, LSU could keep it close. I didn't think it was ever going to happen. Mike, did you see anything that really stunned you in a 29-0 but whooping?
No, well, you know what? I think we learned a lot about Alabama, right? Because everyone looked at this and said Alabama hadn't really been tested before this. And a lot of people used that to slight Alabama's record, the things leading up to it. Why were they getting so much hype? You saw why, because all year long, what's the story been? Tua and those wide receivers. They've been dynamic, great yard after catch group. And what happened? Well, LSU's got a great secondary. That portion of their game wasn't quite as dominant as we've seen. Tua looked like he was a little bit shook by the environment at times. So they decided to just rush for 280-plus yards and call it a night there instead.
Let's be honest, Gary, this is just a dynamic, incredible Alabama team, and there's no two ways about it. They're just better than everybody.
Are we handing out moral victories, though? Because LSU did force Tua to throw his first interception since he took over as starter. And that's SEC's LSU, and that's what they are left with after a 29-0 blanket, which I was a guest on your and Treavor Scales' college football show Saturday, and I said, they're going to keep it close. You said not even within 21, and I thought that was blasphemy.
Yeah, I did say
But they won by 29, and I look like an idiot. Well, more so now than I usually do.
I mean, I will say on Saturday, I said at least 3 touchdowns in the win. It just didn't surprise me. And here's what everybody wants to do quickly and easily is just say, well, LSU's not that good. That's not true. LSU is good. Bama's just that much better. So I'm not going to downplay LSU. I'm going to upsell Alabama.
Well, it's a reminder of what most teams are in college football. They're good at one thing. Like most teams in college football are good at one thing. Alabama is good at many, so in order to beat Alabama, you've got to take some extra measures.
So we decided we would take a look at potential ways to beat Alabama. Number one, give the other team 12 players.
That's not going to work.
Yeah,
we need about 15, 16 dudes defensively against Tua's offense, and then conversely, offensively, just so you can beat Bama's D. 12 is not going to work.
Okay, how about time machines? Do we like that? Now, are you?
Is that to like go back and stop the players from being born, or to like stop Nick Saban from taking the job?
What are the time machine capabilities? How
Time
far
machine
can you
go
go
wait,
back?
check this. Follow me here. Time machine goes back to the Dolphins. All right, gets the Miami Dolphins to sign Drew Brees. Drew Brees links up with Nick Saban. Saban never leaves the Dolphins. Bama never gets Saban. Dynasty never born.
All right, so the time machine so far is.
You don't like time machines anymore?
Foss,
Time
what's your
machine's
beef
leader
with
in the
time
clubhouse.
machines?
All right, number 3, actual Bears.
Okay.
I don't think actual Bears can. I don't think actual Bears are too slow.
Well, I'm in on this.
Is that a common refrain? I don't know. It is now, I guess.
Gojo, I'm in on this because you alluded to Bama at LSU playing the Tigers. What if they had to play actual Tigers?
Actual Tigers, Tua Tagovailoa.
Correct.
Is the one I would name the lead Tiger in all of this.
And I'm going to go back to, we're getting the comments like Pittsburgh fan 72. Bama plays the weakest outer conference schedule in the nation. Okay, understand what we're talking about here. For as much as you want to complain about the out of conference schedule that they play, and I've been the first to rail on how weak it is, they just took, according to the committee, the number 3 team to task. They just took them out to the shed and they embarrassed them 29-0 on the road on a Saturday night in LSU in the toughest environment you can imagine over the weekend. They went in and they kicked butt. Like, you've just got to stop dying on that hill of their schedule is weak when they go out and they beat a great team and they make them look awful in the process.
Can I play devil's advocate here?
Yeah.
Do not sleep on the Citadel Bulldogs, who Bama sees in 2 weeks. But what I'm saying is obviously they're going to smoke them. Foss, hold on. I know you were deer in the headlights there. But what I'm saying is they're obviously going to absolutely demolish them. But to the point, Tua is probably only going to play the first half. So in essence, the schedule thing is correct because it's really a bye week for them. So you can see how that is the weak schedule. I mean, that's essentially giving them more rest.
Sure. It's a weak schedule. And I think, the out-of-conference schedule is inexcusable. And I've been quick to yell at Nick Saban for yelling at fans for not wanting to go see cupcake games. I think it's ridiculous. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to take anything away from what winning at LSU on a Saturday night means. And I've a couple of comments that it's not the toughest environment. Fine, you're splitting hairs. It's one of. If you don't want to call it the toughest,
Man, who else you want to put up there?
You were there.
Like,
you were at the game.
Who else
Saturday.
you want to put up there? Like, I've been to the Big House. I've been to Norman. I've been to plenty of these spots. Like, you could maybe say, Tennessee might lay claim to that. I'm struggling to find other stadiums that I think are going to produce that kind of environment. Because sitting down there as a fan on the sideline, I had trouble trying to think. And I thought, all right, try and put myself back out in that offensive line that you saw for Alabama out there in the beginning of that almost get Tua hurt because the refs couldn't even hear the whistles half the time early on in this game. That crowd affected the game in a real way early on. Now, the crowd was not on the list there because it was not a good enough weapon to actually beat Bama for any long stretch of time because LSU still had to deal with the fact that they found out Joe Burrow is a lot like the other quarterbacks LSU had, which is not good enough to beat Bama.
You're seeing the rest of the schedule here for Bama, and you're right. Mississippi State, Citadel, Auburn, none of those teams are going to present a challenge that realistically. The next challenge,
Mississippi State's D-line is going to be an interesting matchup for them. Now, and listen, on the other side, Nick Fitzgerald is an interesting mobile quarterback. What do we always hear about Alabama? You beat him with a mobile quarterback. Now, Nick can't really throw the ball with any sort of accuracy or consistency, but as a rushing threat, he's at least an interesting option. So I won't say Michigan. And people also knock the defense as Bama's face. Mississippi State's at least an elite defense, especially up front.
And don't worry, we're going to get to the rest of the top 25 and what the rest of this looks like. If you're just tuning in, college football playoff rankings reaction, you can be a part of the conversation. Hashtag rankings reaction. Mike Golic Jr., Jason Fitz. We're here every single week. We're going to be here from 8:30 to 9:30 tonight Eastern time, getting you caught up on what we expect, and then we will get your reaction. Our special guest host tonight, Gary Streisky, in the house joining us. I'm going to throw the guys in the booth for a loop. If we can bring back up the creative ways to beat Alabama. We didn't get to all of them, so I want to see if we can get back to that. We'll give them a second to see if that's even manageable.
What are you doing?
And I love the comments and the fact that people will come in and either decide that we're too pro Alabama or we're hating on Alabama. And the fact is, like, it is possible to be neither. Like, it is possible to have absolutely no bias one way or the other towards any. I always tell people, I don't have a favorite college football team. I just respect greatness, and that's what we're watching. We didn't get on the potential ways to beat Bama. Number 4, jetpacks, which is interesting.
It's
because,
a legit one.
I mean, how are you going to tackle somebody if only one team has jetpacks? So
But
I
do you get credit for the touchdown crossing the plane if you never land? Like, would you actually have to come down, or is
You
it just
leave the
crossing
stadium
the plane?
completely, take the ball and
Yeah, I
everything?
guess you just have to cross the plane. So
My favorite, though, is the 5th one, train an elephant to roll the tide. See, because so much irony is involved in there, that's really meta.
Wow, I thought
but
it was
again,
the other
it
kind
says
of train.
elephant singular, so I'm assuming
Yeah.
it's one elephant. Not going to be enough.
Who has the time to train the elephant?
I'm currently training a puppy, a golden doodle puppy, which I think can potentially be similar. So if somebody has an elephant they want me to take under my wing, I'm just
Are you saying you could train your puppy to beat Bama?
probably not. She's too cute. She likes to lick.
Yeah.
She is adorable.
Hey.
I'm not going to
Yeah,
lie.
you really want to put her out there in front of that defense. Be my guest.
And there is something ironic about the fact that you two, you two athletic, big guy, athletic guys, right? You guys like small dogs. I'm the little guy. I'm the one with the 150-pound puppy, but I don't think, I wouldn't put my money on him to beat Bama.
I like this one. Alabama must get 30 yards to get a first down.
That's too easy.
See, I actually.
Two was throwing for 30 a clip.
Yeah, that is true. As to his yards per completion
Yeah.
are staggering.
So as we get caught up on what we expect, and as soon as the rankings come out, we will get you our reaction to them. We are getting asked by several people, Streisky, do you have a favorite college football team?
I do. I'm all in on Georgia this season, and it has nothing to do with anything other than, do you guys see the docuseries QB1 on Netflix?
No.
Love Jake Fromm. Basically, they featured 3 of the top high school quarterbacks their senior year. It was Jake Fromm, Tate Martell, Ohio State. Their name is escaping me, but he plays at Wake Forest now. And Jake Fromm was just like, that's the dude. He's going hunting. He's going fishing.
Well, yeah, I mean,
He's the man.
He hurt his.
He loves his mom.
He hurt his off-throwing hand riding four-wheelers
Yeah, and
this
then he hooked it
offseason.
with a
Like he
fish.
almost compromised their season.
He's the man.
because
He
he is that big of an outdoorsman.
Yeah, he was in a tent hunting hogs. He got one, never found it. I'm like, this is the man.
This sounds good, but I'm not 100% sure that Treavor Scales and L. Duncan didn't get to you because there's a lot.
Well, Ellen and I have history.
There's a lot of
we worked
Georgia
together
love.
before, so maybe it rubbed off on me a little. But the tipping point was getting to know Jake Fromm from the Netflix series and being like, that dude's the man.
Okay.
And really, I'm just rooting for him.
All right, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. Our rankings. We're being asked, what are our rankings? I'm going to clear my throat. There's no easy way to do this. What are our rankings?
You
Sorry,
did
guys.
great.
There's
You
no
did
cough
fantastic.
button here.
That's what
Got
it
no
is.
cough button. This one's pretty clear for me. I mean, Alabama's number 1, Clemson's number 2, and unfortunately, I think Michigan's number 3. And
Wow.
wait, no, Notre Dame's
Yeah,
number 3.
I was going to
Michigan's
say
number
that
4.
was
Okay.
not. Don't
Notre
switch-
Dame's 3,
don't
Michigan's
get,
4.
don't get all brand new to try and cater to the comment section.
No, look, we got him here. We got him. See, I got to
Very
remember.
disrespectful.
No, Notre Dame 3, Michigan 4, Georgia 5, Oklahoma 6. So, and Mike and I agree.
I look handsome as hell on my headshot.
Kumbaya. You got new headshots
I can
too.
say I got new headshots. I look skinny in that one.
Yeah,
It's
you do
nice.
look skinny. Like that's nice, like side view angle. That the
Tavon Bowers, by the way, the quarterback from Wake
Tavon
Forest.
Bowers,
the other
that's
guy.
who also cool dude. Loves his mom.
Gary, you got any thoughts on the?
I love this, but just for the sake of being a contrarian, I'm going to flip, even though I do think Michigan deserves the 4 spot, let's just flip Georgia and Michigan because their resumes are really, really identical. Their last 3 games have been against AP top 25 teams, really top 15 teams, and the only blemish really is the 1 loss from Georgia recently.
And I'm going to be honest. I would not be shocked if the committee agreed with you. I really wouldn't. What I think we have to remember is that the committee has told us they see every single week is a brand new week,
That's
which
such a-
means
that's a lot.
whatever they said last week doesn't matter. They're going to take this week. So a
way.
win over the number 9 team.
I love that you're saying that. Gary's just looking at you going, no.
There's
no way.
There's like no way.
Not possible.
There's no way.
A convincing win over the number 9 team in the country
Yep.
only boosts Georgia's resume at some point because Kentucky was, agree or disagree, staggering as it was last week, Kentucky was number 9.
Well, they were number 9, and I think it's going to be interesting the way we hold that because we know strength of resume is something the committee really values. And so when you bring up Georgia as a point, I was reading an article by Heather Dinich who does a great job covering this and is as dialed in with the committee room as anyone else. And she points out how much strength of resume traditionally matters, and the Final Four teams usually find their way in there. Strength of resume right now, 1 through 4. Notre Dame at number 1, Alabama at number 2, Clemson at number 3, and Georgia at number 4, just above Michigan. Now, these are razor-thin margins. For Georgia and Michigan, they're separated by 1/100th in strength of resume. But it's still enough to at least, like you said, make this a conversation about who would be that 4 team.
Well, and one interesting thing that we don't know is how close was the vote last week? Because let's remember that this is a 13-person committee. One vote can actually swing an entire look at it.
And that's what I was going to ask you, because you guys went to Dallas to go through the whole mock thing.
Funny you say
Yeah,
that.
that's what we went to
Dallas
Dallas.
mention.
Everyone knows these guys went to Dallas. So it just has to be a majority since it's 13. It doesn't have to be unanimous, anything like that. It's just
Right,
the majority
everybody votes. And,
Okay.
and the way you vote, and this is really interesting, is you vote 1 through 3,
Yep.
and then you vote 4
Okay.
through 6. And then when the whole process is done, they go back to number 5, and somebody in the room makes a case for why number 5 should be number 4, and they call for a revote. So one person can sway a room. I mean, realistically, one person, one really convincing speaker that goes in and has their info together and truly believes, let's say in this example, that Georgia is number 5. If somebody in the room really believes Georgia is above Michigan, it only takes flipping one vote in some instances to actually flip the entire script. And that's why we are going to make this massive deal if it comes out different without any context to what the vote was last week. If it was a one-person vote, that win could be enough to change it.
Usually what gets explained is when we have the questions after, or when they join our TV broadcast and talk to Herbie and those guys, usually it was asked, how close was the vote from 4 to 5? What was the gap like between 5 and 6? And usually that's what we find out from the committee, where the largest drop-off was and how they group these teams together. And it's going to be interesting. Like I said, the margin as far as one of the metrics that they trust is razor thin. But how does the committee assess what that win looks like over Kentucky? Because it's really going to be, how do they value the wins they got this weekend? Michigan went and blew Penn State out. Penn State was ranked 14th. That was a team that they beat up. This is the other part of the human committee. Trace McSorley was beat up coming into that game. He was shuffled in and out during portions of that game, and Michigan ran away with it. Georgia beat a Kentucky team that maybe was starting to get to the point where just because that record ends up being a little bit overvalued in all of this. So how does the human committee look at what they saw?
You're watching the College Football Playoff Rankings reaction show. You can get in on the fun hashtag Rankings Reaction. He's Mike Golic Jr. I'm Jason Fitz. Mike Foss, producer extraordinaire, also mic'd up tonight in the kitchen, just hanging out to interject whenever he feels like it. And our special guest host, Gary Streisky. We're going to be here until 9:30 Eastern time. So as soon as we get the rankings, we will give them to you, and we will give you our immediate reaction from them as we get there. A lot of people are asking about head-to-head because one of the conversations that people want to have, and I don't think it's an appropriate one right now, is Michigan versus Notre Dame, because Notre Dame beat Michigan, but there are some that think that right now Michigan is playing better football. So
there's a lot of people.
So now we've got, admitting Mike's bias over here to Notre Dame, but how do you handle head-to-head when you've got an undefeated team and a one-loss team, and maybe that one-loss team actually looks better than the undefeated team?
Yeah, well, I don't think it matters right now. Like, head-to-head matters when the resumes are comparable, right? And right now, with no blemish in the loss column, I don't think you can factor that in yet. Now, in theory, though, that's what we have this committee for, right? To discern this kind of stuff. The problem is the only example we have to go off in the past where head-to-head came up in this way was with Ohio State and Penn State a couple of years ago, where Penn State beats Ohio State, wins the Big 12, but doesn't get in because Ohio State in everyone's mind looked that much better. Problem with that comparison is Ohio State had one loss it had one loss that season. Penn State had 2.
So where would you?
Okay, so this is where you guys help me flesh this one out, because the committee says every single week they go back to the drawing board and they don't reference other weeks. And of course, the Michigan Notre Dame game was week 1. So when they're talking about head-to-head, I know it's an aggregate of the strength of resume and everything like that, but that's the resume for the entire season. So what exactly are they doing when you're talking to the committee guys? They're going off of the previous week's games, but then we're still referencing these head-to-heads that previously happened.
I think what the committee would tell you is that everything is a factor, and no one factor is more important than any other factor.
Okay.
So when they're looking at, that's why Mike is constantly saying not strength of schedule, but strength of resume.
What the average college football team would do against your schedule.
Yeah.
That's the sense. That's what that metric is supposed to measure.
And some of the more interesting things that they actually look at statistically is, okay, how many more points did your team score versus what that team, their opponents usually allow.
Although that we were told for so long margin of victory didn't matter. What a farce that was.
Yeah, it completely does. So I think you have a situation here where head-to-head has tremendous value when you have two teams that you look at and say, okay, these two teams are truly equal. And so, I would say, honestly, right now, if Notre Dame took a loss, this would be even more difficult because now you have head-to-head for two one-loss teams. Right now, frankly, the resume for Notre Dame doesn't have any blemishes on it. And that's the most difficult part of this because in my perfect world, I want the best four teams to make the playoffs. What do you do if one of the best four teams has a loss? And you've got undefeated teams around them. That's sort of the trick we had a few years ago. Where do you draw the line? And I'll go back to USC. The first time, a couple of years ago, the first time we ever did a show together, Mike, was the year that USC had started off with a couple losses and then went on the run. And by the end of the year, they were a two-loss team, but they were incredible.
They were a three-loss team.
They
were a three-loss team, but we also remember, we factor the things in. The reason they got so much press was because Sam Darnold didn't start the first 3 games of that season.
You're correct.
They went on that losing streak without him at the helm. Sam Darnold takes over, and all of a sudden people say, well, this is a team no one wants to see. That was the same year this happened because, remember, we got that great Penn State-USC Rose Bowl out of that whole situation. That was one of the best college football games of the season, but both of those teams fell victim to what this committee is supposed to do, which is use the things that wouldn't show up in the BCS computers to register, all right, well, when this happened, when Penn State, a lot of people were arguing because they got blown out by Michigan that year, but we remember Penn State was down every one of their linebackers in that game. They were a triage unit, so there's all these things that you try and get in there, and for Notre Dame and Michigan, it's how much do you wait for Michigan? Well, they've gotten better. They've improved on offense since that first game. Shea Patterson is being used differently versus Notre Dame, who has an entirely different quarterback from the first 3 games of the season.
So, Gary, let me ask you something. Because we are let's, as we veer here, speaking about Notre Dame, before we get to what I'll ask you, confidence meter. We do this every week. We let Mike Golic Jr. give us his confidence in Notre Dame right now.
Through
and
the
it is
roof.
a woo!
Oh, yeah.
You went from an 80 to a
That's
92?
pretty good.
Well, Sky High, let me explain. My
9-0
confidence
does
is
that
that
to
high
you.
this week because last week, you got to think, we're going on the road, Northwestern's a team. I mean, hell, you want to talk about common opponent. Michigan went on the road at Northwestern, beat them by 3. So this is a tough Northwestern team. Was a little worried about that one. Notre Dame's got Florida State coming to town. It's a home game. The forecast in South Bend is something like 31 as the high, with winds near 20 miles an hour.
And weather is a factor to the committee, correct?
And a chance of snow.
Yes.
No, weather's a factor to Florida State, who's going to walk
Also
into this
that
game
too.
looking for a reason to
Also
quit.
that too.
And all you have to do is give them one at the beginning of that game, and they'll be gone.
So is this the point? We're going to pull up the Notre Dame schedule. This is the point where you try and fill my head with trap game stuff that sort of excuses why there's not a lot left there because Florida State not good. Now, Syracuse has had a better – let's give
Syracuse
the Orange
is
a little bit.
What, 13th or 14th ranked team in the AP right now?
We're going to give them some love. Syracuse is actually – I look at that game as an incredible spoiler opportunity. USC is just – the wheels have fallen off. But, the Syracuse game, I'm surprised I'm saying this, is the one that I look at and say, man, that could be – there's your difficult piece.
The Syracuse game is interesting to me, and really they're an interesting team to me tonight because how are they ranked down the stretch? Because Notre Dame, all of their games in the beginning, Stanford was ranked when they played them. Virginia Tech on the road was a ranked game at the time, and those have fallen off. And for Michigan right now, they've had time where these 3 games, Wisconsin, Michigan State, Penn State, are 3 ranked teams at the time, but we're seeing them cascade rapidly. There's a chance they could all be out of the top 25 in a week or two, and then do we view that the same way we view that stretch for Notre Dame? Well, man, it looked good at the time, but. And so that's why that Syracuse team, being a ranked team down the stretch, is going to matter because Michigan's got the trump card of ranked Ohio State at the end of the year.
Well, so that brings me to my question for you, Gary, because there's a legit shot in my mind at this point, follow me here, that Notre Dame's going to make the playoff in my mind. And there's at least, I don't think it's going to happen, but Georgia's in the SEC championship game. Georgia, they could, in theory, somehow, some way, maybe Alabama misses the bus. They don't show up to the game. Somehow Georgia wins the SEC championship. If that were to happen, in my mind, Alabama, Georgia, and Notre Dame are all in the playoff, which eliminates, that means you've got 2 teams from the SEC and 1 team without a conference, which means you're basically going to eliminate several of the major conferences.
Of course.
Do you have a problem with that in the playoff system?
I do, in the sense that because the college football playoff is supposed to represent, obviously, the Power Five, the ACC, Big 12, Pac-12. So those teams aren't getting represented. And in your scenario where Georgia does take care of Bama December 1st in the SEC championship game, you'd still have to keep Bama in there. Georgia, it'd be Notre Dame and Clemson.
Right.
So you're missing a Big 12 team, you're missing a Pac-12 and a Big 12. This is why I think Big 10. That's why expansion, I think, is clutch. I know you guys talk about this every single week. I'm all for a 7-team expansion. Seven. 8's too many. 6 isn't enough. You get.
Look, I'm a musician. I only count
you get
to 4.
Power 5. You get
7?
Power 5 teams in there, and based off of what the committee does, they're supposed to be, objective committee members. You give the top-ranked team, which in this case would be Bama if they stay winless, a bye week. And then you make the other teams play. I don't know. It works in my head. It works in my head. You give them a bye week.
Using Common Core?
I was saying we got to worry about the education system in this country.
And here's the other thing. Do we really want? I always say this to the playoff
teams, two bye teams.
Two bye teams.
2 buys. Okay. It's got to be your bull.
But my other side of it though is if we start giving automatic bids to conferences, then you could have a year where suddenly a 7-win Wisconsin team is in the playoff, and I don't know that we really want.
Well,
that.
I mean, have we had a year where that's necessarily the case?
But,
the Pac-12 could be your poster child for that, but people also seem to really like conference championships, right? Like that's one of the things. To your point, the committee in the playoff is not here to represent the conferences. It's here to give us the 4 best teams in college football. That is their charge. But we were told conference championships are supposed to mean something in all of this. It's supposed to be something that the committee values. With automatic qualifiers in an expanded playoff, you add the value back to conference championships. Right now, they're a 13th data point. Then they become a ticket to the tournament.
Right, and I think the most interesting part of the 13th data point is how the committee is going to handle great teams that lose in their championship game. Because we're absolutely in a world where right now you want to tell me that Clemson goes to the ACC championship, suddenly slips up, and they're playing an extra game, one game that Notre Dame isn't playing, and because they slip up in it, they miss the playoff. I mean, how they'll treat teams that played the extra data point and lost is going to be one of the defining things of this committee.
Yeah, it's risk reward. So I don't know. So it becomes interesting then for all those reasons now what we have to pay attention to as much as the teams that are rising, that are going to have a chance at that 13th data point is some of the teams that are falling that still have to play some of these teams down the stretch here. Like that's why Virginia and Oklahoma become really interesting right now. Where does West Virginia? Where does West Virginia get slotted in all this? How far does LSU fall in this latest poll? What does that mean for a team like Washington State, who's the Pac-12's only real hope now?
So you're watching the College Football Playoff Rankings Reaction Show. You can get in on the conversation. #Rankings Reaction. Mike Golic Jr., Jason Fitz, Mike Foss hanging out with us, also producer extraordinaire. Gary Streisky, our special guest host, hanging out on the couch. My feet still don't touch the ground.
I just want to point out that you've nailed the promo 3 times. Because last week struggled. Last week was rough, man. But
last week was rough.
You learned from it. You came back, and you're 3 for 3. You're batting 1,000. I don't want to jinx things.
That's
Fitz,
too late.
As I've fallen into the sunken place in the corner of Gojo's couch, but I just needed to tip my hat to you.
That's the corner of shame right there. And it is fair. Gary was hanging out with me on Saturday. On Saturdays, I do host a college football show with Treavor Scales every single Saturday from 7 to 8. So make sure you check that out. Also on Twitter. We get the question, how can a team make it to the playoff if they don't win their conference? Well, that's simple.
We already saw that.
I mean,
multiple times.
And the committee's not apologetic. The committee absolutely says a conference championship is a factor in just like a head-to-head. It's a factor. It can be a factor, but they feel like their job is to pick the 4 best teams no matter what. Now, LSU is going to fall. Obviously, we all know that. I think we will get a statement from the committee about how good they think Alabama is by how far LSU falls, right? I mean, if LSU tumbles, then it's a little bit of a statement to LSU. But I wonder, I wonder what the committee's going to do with LSU.
I'd be real interested if they fell out of the top 10 because who was hanging out in the back of the top 10 last week? Was it UCF?
No.
UCF was 12th or 13th.
Yeah, and it was Washington.
Washington State was 9th.
Was 9. Kentucky was Kentucky was 9.
I'm pulling it up right now. CFP rankings. Kentucky was 9.
Ohio State was 10.
So last week we had Alabama, Clemson, LSU, Notre Dame, Michigan, Georgia, Oklahoma, Washington State, Kentucky, and Ohio State. So you look at who lost, though. Florida lost this last week, correct?
Florida got that butt whooped. They didn't just lose.
So Florida lost. You had LSU lose. So in theory, everyone else moves up. So where does that put LSU? Would you drop LSU down? You probably wouldn't drop them down below Florida. You're still going to have them above UCF, right?
Right.
A 2-loss LSU team still going to be above them. So in theory, LSU could stick around and be right in the back end of the top 10. They could be the number 10 team in the country.
Which still puts LSU squarely in the thick of it for New Year's Six. I mean, they're in the thick of it for a massive bowl game and a huge payout. You know, that's why it's so important, and it's also going to say a lot. Now, the one team none of us have mentioned here at this point is Oklahoma. And all Oklahoma has done, is continue to take care of business. I wonder, though, if Oklahoma, we're now in this situation where if they win out is the question. If Oklahoma wins out, I don't know that Oklahoma can make up the ground at this point with Michigan and Georgia both ahead of them.
Even in a Big 12 championship game, because, they win impressively. And I guess me as a fan of Kyler Murray would just love to see a situation where he gets a chance to play in a college football playoff game just because he's so dynamic. And I know last week Trevor was saying, the Army loss was kind of sketchy and it was a shootout against Texas Tech this past week that they were able to pull out. But, how much credit are you going to give them if they continue to just blaze through this path?
Yeah, and that's the interesting part of it because I think Alabama's going to destroy Georgia. So I'm taking Georgia out of this mix, right? So if I'm taking Georgia out of this mix completely, there's room for Oklahoma to move up. I just don't know that there's enough room for them to get equity into the top 4 because, frankly, the rest of the Big Ten isn't good enough for me to look at anybody and say, yeah, that's the team that can knock off Michigan.
See, the thing in all of this that I just cannot, and as much as I want to, because part of it includes the team that I, was part of as an alma mater, but we have 3 undefeated teams right now in college football, and that's just not going to be the case. I think, in the history of this, how many undefeated teams have actually made it in here? We've maybe had one a year, if that.
Yeah.
It was Florida State the first year was undefeated. Besides that, have we had anyone undefeated make it back into this thing?
No, honestly, it's something I probably should have looked up before.
Yeah,
the
no,
show.
it would have been good research for our producer to have ready for this. But regardless, I could just talk in, kind of uncertain terms about this. But I guess that's my point is we're having to think if it's happened once a year. Mm-hmm. So 3 times in one season, while it is possible, the way Notre Dame's schedule shakes out and the way the ACC looks this year, it might just be the perfect storm. And Bama might be that good and we might get it. But if that's not the case, in my mind, for Oklahoma to get in, if everything else holds serve, they need Ohio State to beat Michigan. And even then, they might need help. Sure. But you talk about the Big 12 championship, there's a chance it could be West Virginia at the end of the season and then West Virginia again in the Big 12 championship. So how does the committee weight you beating the same team twice?
I think that's the conference championship game that I'm the most intrigued to see, though. And if you're the Big 12, that's what you want. You're going to get the same matchup those 2 weeks, right? You're going to get Oklahoma and West Virginia back-to-back, likely. You need one of those teams to win both of those games. But
to have a shot, is what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah.
But you also need those 2 games to be competitive enough that it doesn't feel like they just roll over them. So, in my scenario in my head, Oklahoma's got to find a heartbreaking way to beat West Virginia in the final game of the season and then have that same level of oh my God, epic game. They beat a tremendous football team. If Oklahoma just goes in and rolls over West Virginia twice, I don't think that it gets the same level of street cred. So in my mind,
you're saying that so that way it maintains the credibility of whatever West Virginia
quality
presumably fall under, which is going to be 6, 7, 8, something in that range.
So all right, so we got an answer in the history of the college football playoff committee's rankings and the college football playoff. We have had 3 teams make it to the Final 4 undefeated: Florida State, Clemson, and Alabama, all in separate seasons. So that's what we're dealing with now. So the idea of having 3 make it to the end of the year just seems unlikely statistically at this point. But again, you look down the stretch, the best chances for the teams to slip up down the stretch. For Alabama, I don't know, the best one seems like a stretch to begin with. I don't know if outside of the SEC championship, that seems to be their best shot. It's going to be Clemson this weekend on the road, game day at Boston College, who's a sturdy team, and it's going to be Notre Dame playing at Yankee Stadium against Syracuse. So those are the games that we've really got to look forward to left, because as much as I want to sell you on trap games, those are games they should win.
So I'm going to throw the guys in the booth that are doing a great job for a loop. If we could pull those conference championship games back up, I want you guys to see it. While they pull that up, it's a college football playoff rankings reaction show. You can get into the conversation. You guys are in the conversation. You're blowing us up. We're trying to get into the comments as much as we can. Hashtag rankings reaction. And you can get into the conversation. When you see the list here, the SEC, Georgia versus Bama, there's obviously some credibility they'll get from that. I don't know that any of the rest of those games, when you look at Utah versus Washington State, that's not going to be a game that vaults you into the playoff conversation. Clemson versus Pittsburgh doesn't vault you into the playoff conversation. And
they're already there.
As nice as Northwestern's season has been, Michigan versus Northwestern isn't going to vault you into some second level. So these conference championship games, while they'll be great rivalry games and they might be great games, I don't think it's going to be a difference maker to the committee.
Are you saying none of these games are decision makers? These are all negatives for the teams that are in the hunt for college football playoff spots.
It's not going to It's not going to bring you up into the top 4.
The Big 12's championship game has potential to be strong. The SEC
that's the one
game is absolutely going to be a factor. And honestly, depending on how everyone else gets there, if a couple of these if Notre Dame and Clemson or potentially Alabama slip up, what Washington State does against Utah in the Pac-12. Now, again, very human factor. Utah just lost Tyler Huntley, their starting quarterback for the year, for a collarbone injury. So you're going to be playing against a team with a backup quarterback getting there. How does that downgrade what that means for you? But it would still potentially be a one-loss conference champion.
Well, and that's what I'm really saying when I look at it, Gary. Because when I look at Alabama, Georgia, that game, whoever wins it immediately is going to get a vault from it, right?
Oh, of course.
The rest of it, to your point, Washington State beats Utah. It's not going to catapult them ahead of other teams because of it. And I even think that as much as I just said, I think that Oklahoma, West Virginia would be the most interesting of those games to watch. I don't think it's a catapulting game in the rankings either. So it's a weird spot to be in where I feel like everybody sort of needs everybody else to figure themselves out. It's not like one team just controls their destiny. Other than Bama, Georgia.
Yeah, I would say other than Alabama and Georgia, and that it becomes so interesting because we play all these scenarios out, and obviously there's a lot of them to mix and match that are predicated on somebody dropping the ball. And we thought we had we kind of had a reckoning weekend, what was it, 2 or 3 weeks ago, where a ton of ranked teams lost. Already, I think through 8 weeks, it was the second most ranked teams we'd ever had lose in a college football season. That's the kind of turnover that we had so far. And so you've afforded some of these teams the opportunity, and I don't think we're done with that. But when we talk about these situations, and we talk about the conference championships or expansion or anything like that, it's all predicated on the idea, do we think actually any of these teams are built to beat Alabama? Because that's the standard we're going against. Do you think Clemson or any of these teams? Do you think Oklahoma, if they get a shot? Do you think Michigan, with their great defense, can actually beat Alabama? And that becomes kind of the place we're put in by college football this year. It's become the NBA this season.
Yeah, and to that end, I don't think any of these teams that we're looking at are situated. I don't want to be Debbie Downer. If there's one team that in our minds should be able to compete, it's Clemson. Clemson's got 4 guys on the defensive line. They're going to be NFL players, right? But I just don't think Clemson can score the points to keep up with them. I think that the difference in size between Bama and Clemson, even on the lines, is just I don't see it. I don't see it.
It's just you've got to be able. What we learned from LSU is you have to be able to put up points. But you've got to also be balanced enough. That's what worries me about Oklahoma is defensively they're a sieve. So your offense can do all these great things, but if you're giving up points in droves, eventually Alabama's defense is good enough to get a win even against the best offenses. Is Oklahoma's defense good enough to stop Tua and company? No. No, it is not.
Well, and a lot of you guys are asking how we could possibly think Michigan could win out and not control their own destiny. And I will again answer to that. If Michigan wins out and Georgia wins out, I think Georgia will go. If Georgia beats Bama for the SEC championship game, then Georgia's going to the playoff.
Oh, there's no question.
Mind. That's not even a question, which would bump out Michigan.
But I don't know. It gets interesting to play the likelihood game because you've said you think Alabama's going to blow Georgia out.
Yeah, I think they're going to kill them.
So if you play the likelihood game and we say Alabama's going to win that one, to me, what becomes more interesting is what do we think is going to happen with Michigan and Ohio State this year? Ohio State has been trending down. They got rolled by Purdue on the road. Nick Bosa left. That defense has been giving up big plays left and right. But Dwayne Haskins has been putting up numbers all year. Now, granted, they almost dropped one in Nebraska this weekend. That was an ugly game. But still, there's a lot of speed on the field for Ohio State, and I feel like in the past that's always what's gotten Michigan in trouble. And for how much better this offense has gotten, it's still not an offense that is chock full of athletes. They've got guys that can make plays. They've got guys that are productive, but they don't have a ton of marquee athletes in the same caliber as Ohio State.
Well, but in my mind, Ohio State is one of the teams that we're seeing that's absolutely receding from the playoff picture. I mean, the way that they looked last week, and again, this is just eye test. You're right. I think it's one of the bigger disappointments at this point, though, in college football, that they haven't been able to put themselves into more of the conversation because they got the athletes for days. They got all sorts of people that should, and they finally have a quarterback in Ohio State that you're looking at saying, man, they got a guy that can play. Dwayne Haskins has been remarkable, I think, at times, but they're still struggling to win games that they should be dominating in. So I think that Ohio State's actually trending the wrong way right now.
That's why there's too many factors in the college football playoff. The factoring all together, they're giving too much credence because you guys mentioned they take into account atmosphere, they take into account, position of the season, everything like that. So even though Ohio State is technically trending down, they're still going to consider that game a primetime matchup for Michigan. So really, it's not doing them that much of a disservice because you think Ohio State, Michigan traditionally, oh my God, this is going to be crazy, especially since Michigan has to go on the road for that game.
Well, it's still going to be an Ohio State team that's a top 10 team in the country.
Exactly.
Like we can say
And
they've been
that
trending
too.
down and all that, but they're still a team that's got their record. They've only got one loss in that column now. It's a loss that if they beat Ohio State and Oklahoma were to win out, I think ultimately gets them out because the committee said you can't get blown out. Like that's the one thing they will not allow is if you have a comparable resume with somebody else, but your loss is a blowout, we're going to show you the door because you have to. That's the one thing we've seen you can't put on tape. So that's what worries me for Ohio State. But getting towards that game, the ones that Ohio State's played down for, I mean, you get beat by Purdue, you almost lose to Nebraska. Those are games Ohio State's not looking at and saying, oh, man, we really got to have our best stuff for that one. You should, but it's human nature to slough off for those ones, and there's no chance they slough off for Michigan.
Sure.
So it's an interesting piece that week 11 and 12, basically huge build-ups to week 13. There's not a lot of games that seem to set up massive upsets. You mentioned Michigan, Ohio State. That's a week 13 game. We've talked a little bit about Oklahoma, West Virginia. That's a week 13 game. I mean, we're a couple of weeks away from what looks like some of the big pieces we need to keep an eye on. Ed, Alabama versus Auburn. That's the other piece. Bama versus Auburn. I mean, Auburn is just been a massive letdown this year. But you still always look at that game and say, well, it's a rivalry
in a
game.
bubble all by itself.
You
all
know,
by itself, no matter if Auburn is doing well, doing crappy in the season, I mean, that lives in its own.
I mean, is there a shot in your mind at this point, Mike, when you look at Bama, Auburn, can we look at the Iron Bowl the same way? I don't think we can.
No, and you looked at the beginning of the season and you said what Jared Stidham offers you tends to be the Alabama beater, but that team's been injured a bunch this year. Jared Stidham has been much more inconsistent than I think we expected, and we saw that. If you're going to put up 50-50 balls, Alabama's defense was the big come-away point from that game against LSU, was that group is still good enough for how green it was coming into the season in the secondary and how they lost some of their main guys in the defensive line like Deron Payne. They've still got enough there to be a problem for you, and I think Auburn lost a bunch of guys in the offensive line too. It's just I don't think matches up well, despite the fact their defense still flies around and make plays. Like they can go out and give you hell. They were firing on all cylinders, throwing a bunch of guys at Mississippi State. Like that wouldn't look like a terrible defense.
You're watching the College Football Playoff Rankings reaction show. Why are we not reacting yet? We haven't gotten them yet. Obviously, this is the most interesting one of the year in the sense that there's college basketball going on. It delays the process a little bit. If you're just tuning in, we're usually here every single week from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern. Mike, who's receding from the playoff picture?
What a guy.
Oh, look at that. Who's receding from the playoff picture?
You guys can recede from my damn house.
Who's receding from the playoff picture?
It looks more like I'm eating whatever team should be involved.
Go ahead.
It's receding.
Is that what it is, Foss?
From the playoff picture.
Listen, yours is kind of going back too.
It is. Right, I've actually seen myself on camera a few times.
Yeah, no, it's humbling, isn't it?
It's a little humbling.
Boys, listen, I'm on Propecia, and I got no qualms about it.
How does that work?
Yeah.
How's it work? I wake up in the morning, I take my Propecia, and I rub some Rogaine, boom, boom, in the thinking spots.
Damn,
and I just hold on and pray.
That's amazing.
No, but let me tell you something.
Propecia's doing that?
Hell yeah.
Gary Streisky comes in with like straight Hawaii 5-0 hair every day. I mean, it's just perfectly cool.
Listen, I got a guy.
You got a guy?
He's my dermatologist, but still, I got a guy.
That's good. That's good. Why do I feel like next week this show's going to be presented by
Foss is going to come with just a full head of hair. Just a full head of hair.
So
I
can we
hate how
ask
they
Mike
brought the handheld cam in to show me and Foss's receding hairlines now.
Listen, mine's starting to kick back too in the
We're
corner,
getting
so this is
head-to-head.
actually kind of a
I
bad
just
angle.
want to
Talk
point,
about a head-to-head matchup, am I right?
Oh,
I just
man,
want
I
to point
sure
out
hope the
that I'm
rankings come
by
out
far
soon.
the oldest person in the room. My hair's just
You haven't
fine.
stressed a day in your life, dude. You've been touring around the world.
My
dude,
hair's just fine.
ripping the violin.
I'm still starting to get a little gray every once in a while.
That's fine. My feet touch the floor.
Well,
Yeah,
I don't know what
Fit-
that feels
and
like.
Fitz
Pretty
has
good
very
trade-off.
tiny hands.
I do, and I have time.
We might be going bald, but you've got the hands of an infant.
They're actually kind of creepy. It's
I
like
got-
when people take those
like-
baby
He's
doll
so little.
hands.
Yeah, I got like the Kristen Wiig SNL
Whopper-
hands.
the
Can you
Whopper
tell us
Jr.
who's receding from the playoff picture?
Receding from the playoff
Yeah, like
picture at this point.
who's gone?
I mean, obviously LSU, right? Like they got shown the door in the most dramatic fashion. While they could probably be ranked, I'd say at 10. Like you're going to have to account for West Virginia moving up a bunch in this latest round of polls. West Virginia, who last week, if I look at this correctly, was 13 last week. So they're probably going to vault over Florida, vault over UCF, and be right behind Ohio State. Kentucky's going to be out of that picture, and LSU. So they'll be 10, but they're out of this thing.
Where's UCF going to fall this week? Because you just mentioned, I mean, Florida lost.
Florida lost, so you had LSU and Kentucky both lose inside the top 10, but you had Florida get a win, or you had West Virginia get a win there. There's a chance UCF could be 11. Like, I feel like they can move up. Well, the thing
One
is,
spot?
UCF also was in a very close game against Temple on a Thursday night. A Temple team that record betrays how
pulled
good
away a
that
little
team
bit.
actually is. But they found a way to come back in. Sick alternate uniforms, by the way. Some sort of like constellation stargazing uniforms. They were pretty great.
Yeah, their uniforms were like their championship, alternate. It's not real.
Oh, wow. That
I had to
joke,
think about
that
that
joke only loose. It was a thinking man's joke.
Thank you. Very meta. I went very meta on the College Football Playoff Rankings reaction show. Don't even really know what meta means. I just know the cool kids say it. Mike Golic Jr., Jason Fitz, Mike Foss shaking his head in disgust, his balding head in disgust. Gary Streisky is our guest co-host for the day.
For the sake of chaos, why don't they just throw UCF somewhere in the 8 category, 7 or 8 category, because all those other teams are going to fall back behind 10. So that way, if something drastic does happen in that 4 to 6, 4 to 7 range, and UCF keeps winning, they can just inch closer. So you can at least give that fan base a little bit more than just keeping them outside of the top 10 and making them look through the picket fence.
But it's not their job to make a fan base feel good. It's their job to decide who the top 25 teams are in the country with no consideration to anybody's feelings. It's not a participation award.
Gosh.
It's a committee that takes it seriously. And
I don't even like UCF when my feelings are hurt.
Well, you know,
My feelings are invested, Fitz.
it's these guys take the process of deciding who the
Yeah.
top 25 are really serious. Like it means something to them. They watch the film, they go through the games, and they get into that room and they argue it, and it has tremendous meaning. Like they're not just arbitrarily ripping on UCF, and I think UCF fans feel like they are. They're sitting in a room and asking themselves with the most educated process they can who the best 25 teams in the country are.
Yeah, so I think that's the one you really cross off the list, because outside of that, we know who the contenders are. Like, UCF is not going to make the college football playoff this year. Florida, definitely not going to make the playoff. Penn State lost. Utah has already got 2 losses on their schedule. Iowa's, like, everyone from there on down, you can cancel. So the only one we can really rule out at this point is LSU, because Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame, Michigan, Georgia, Oklahoma, Washington State, Ohio State, and West Virginia all are still alive in this. Everybody else, you can effectively cancel.
Can any of them, other than Clemson, beat Alabama? And if you say Notre Dame, my God.
They got a shot, man.
Oh!
No, hey, you've been incredibly balanced, Gojo. I mean, it's incredible.
Well, I mean, you come up here last week and it's amazing. Like, we'll get to the bias rankings a little bit, but I have clearly triggered one fan base's delicate psyche as they try and justify their rise through the college football playoff rankings. But
You triggered somebody?
oh yeah, I look at
triggered,
what it
bro?
takes to beat, and the reason we get enamored with teams is because they're good at one thing. You've got to be diverse enough to be good at a few things if you're going to beat Alabama, because so are they. They're a Swiss Army knife. That's what we found out this weekend. So if you can only do one thing, they're going to suffocate you with their ability to do many things, and that's what Clemson has in its favor. Now they have it with a freshman quarterback that makes it difficult. Notre Dame may not be great on defense, may not be great on offense, but they're very good at both. And so that at least gives you a chance. You've got a very accurate quarterback who is mobile. Like, again, when we factor in the things that traditionally beat Bama, Ian Book is not moving as well as Brandon Bush, but he is mobile. We just saw him. I mean, he scored the game-sealing touchdown against Northwestern. He's got enough of that wiggle to his game. Shea Patterson in Michigan. Those are all teams that kind of have that makeup. Obviously, I'm like you, Gary. I would give anything. I don't think they'd win, but I would love to see Kyler Murray against that team.
Sure.
I just want to see him in the playoffs.
He can ball.
And I think watching Oklahoma every week, just watching that offense has been dynamic. Now, Drew did point out on Twitter, just for our edification, the UCF jerseys were they're part of the NASA program, and so it was their space jerseys, which is kind of awesome. So I did not know that. So there we go. And Frankie says Washington State can beat Alabama. No, that's I mean, that's cute.
They gave you the wink though, so they even knew they were kidding.
If you wink at it, does that mean that it's absolutely like there's no way, shape, or form that
If they
any of
wink
us
at you,
believe?
that can mean a lot of things. Fitz.
Wait, hold on. So we've got, obviously, we're waiting.
We're getting reports as things go.
We're waiting to find out at the end of the basketball game right now. Obviously, Michigan State, Kansas. There's about a minute left in that one. But speaking of Kansas, it was not so subtly elbowed to me. Apparently, Les Miles getting some Kansas talk, being linked to that job. They just fired their head coach, who's going to finish out the year, which seems cruel. Right, that's like breaking up with your significant other, but allowing them just to live in the house for the rest of the time. Like,
as long as they're paying rent, man.
I watched.
That's a fair point.
I watched, Les Miles with Marty Smith over the weekend. I don't know if you saw that. Marty had some time to hang out with Les Miles, and we were talking about hair earlier. He's using some interesting hair coloring products at this point. I mean, it is deep dive. Like, go back and watch Marty Smith hanging out with Les Miles, because it's like a color of red that I don't know if he stoked the head and like beet juice or what it was.
Yeah, I was gonna say, are you filibustering at this point? Like, Les Miles seriously go to Kansas?
That'd be incredible.
Where
Kansas
else is
football
he
will be
gonna
back.
go? They would have to replace the entire turf, because Les Miles isn't going to play on artificial.
No, yeah, I was just saying, he has a standard to uphold right now.
Man's
that
got
at the very least, you have Les's grass off at the side. He can just walk out.
He's got to chew on something.
I mean, why, if you're Les Miles, you're not getting any calls anywhere else. So this is just an indication that he really wants to get back.
Not any calls yet. Like, you don't know what job shake loose before the end of the year. Do you really want to be stuck in Kansas?
I'm going to coach Auburn.
Ooh. That is true, because this could be that year.
Nuts.
Man. 3-3 Auburn.
Yeah.
I mean, now their AD just said that Malzahn got the vote of confidence, so that means he's for sure.
Well, I was gonna say, the vote of confidence means they're getting ready to cut. They're sharp their gas.
Just like,
you're
doing great, Gus.
If I'm Auburn, I'm not firing Gus Malzahn to hire Les Miles. I mean, I don't think as a program,
lateral move.
When you're talking about the donors and the benefactors that are behind Auburn, they're not going to get stoked for that move. That's not a move that's going to make them jump up and down. When you talk about Auburn as a program, you talk about a program that has a tremendous amount of pride and feels that they are one of the nation's true top programs and capable of winning a national championship.
You don't think Les Miles was that when he was at LSU?
He was, but Nick Saban kind of killed that, right? And especially in modern college football, does Les Miles fit? He still wants to do the things that old Bama was doing and that only old Bama could get away with.
Little Oklahoma drills, line up, yeah.
And were you ever sitting there, if you're Auburn, were you ever sitting there saying, we got to take on LSU and Les Miles this week? I mean, I'm not taking anything away from a coach that had a tremendous winning percentage at LSU. He absolutely did. But I don't think that the rest of the SEC programs as fan bases really feared him as a head coach. And if Auburn makes a move, in my mind, they're going to feel like they're in the program status that would allow them to get a nationally recognizable hype hire. They feel like they would deserve a huge name coming into Auburn.
Les Miles is watching this right now, that red hair, fire hot. after that. Fitz.
It's
the
beet
disrespect,
red. Like,
unbelievable.
looks like beet juice. Like, he soaked it.
Yeah, beet juice. I'm really kind of concerned about where you came up with that one from.
No, I mean, that's what it looked like. I'm just saying. I don't know a lot about it. You guys can get into the conversation. It's the Rankings Reaction Show, but we don't have rankings yet to react to. We will. Hashtag Rankings Reaction to get in on the conversation. And I love the conversation. Like, y'all are yelling at each other at this point. You're having your own arguments about whether or not Michigan's any good and if Alabama's schedule's been soft. And I'm going to go back to, again, yes, it is possible. Like, this is that medium that college football fans need to remember sometimes. It's possible for Alabama to have played a soft schedule and for Alabama also to just be, like, damn better than everybody.
Sure.
Like, that is possible to exist. It's possible that their schedule's a joke and that they're still clearly the best team in the country.
Well, because if you have a schedule that is quote-unquote soft, but you go out there and treat every team like they are that much beneath you, it's kind of an indication of who you are. Like, we've seen plenty of teams play substandard teams closer than they should. Alabama does not do that. They don't even give these teams room to breathe. I mean, hell, who was it, Arkansas or somebody that put up 31 on them by accident? And you thought after the game Nick Saban was ready to kill these guys.
Yeah.
Like, that's the standard. It's what he always talks about, the standard they hold themselves to, where even in a game you still win by 30 if you give up that kind of points. That's unacceptable because they know what they are, and so do all of us.
Is the scariest thing for Alabama, their biggest competition too was me. He had the two instances against LSU where it was like, Bama fans grabbed the chest.
Well, yeah,
when they went high-low on him, the no play, and he went out, and then he came back in, and then he came back in. And then that 44-yard touchdown run where afterwards he grabbed the knee brace quickly, and I'm sure Bama fans were like, the knee. I mean, that's really the only thing that can slow the offense down is quite literally if Tua's knee limits him and slows him down.
I will also argue this. We're having the wrong conversation as a college football community about Bama. The conversation shouldn't be who's going to beat Bama this year. It's why the heck is anybody going to be able to beat them next year? I mean, realistically, Tua has to come back. He can't go to the draft.
Yeah.
Jalen Hurts can't come back, right?
Hey.
So you're looking at a situation where they could still come back with two national championship winning quarterbacks on a defense that right now is young and is going to get better as it goes, and they're still going to be stacked at every other position. I mean, I think right now the conversation is, in the next 18 months, will anybody beat Alabama? And the answer to me is clearly no.
Maybe this is a good thing, though, because then after next year, once Tua leaves, Alabama won't know how to adjust back to an offense without a quarterback, but they still won't get another good one, and it'll kill the Saban dynasty.
Did his brother commit to Bama, or is he still on the Georgia thing? To his brother.
I don't know. We don't need to talk about him and act like he's going to come to Alabama. Please, God in heaven, somebody else recruit that young man.
Yeah, he was at LSU, right? Like, he was at LSU taking an official visit, just hanging out.
By the way, all right, we got Kansas. They beat Michigan State 92-87. So predictions for the college football playoff Final Four before the rankings come out? Anybody? Anybody?
The college basketball Final Four?
No, our college football playoff Final Four.
I was going Butler and George Mason again. Just kidding.
Yeah, let's do both.
Butler, George Mason, Duke.
You think Villanova's underrated at 9 defending champions?
Wait, I'm stunned that. Did you say the final score in that game was 92-87?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's
Mike
actually,
said it. I didn't, but
Michigan
yes.
State was
You're
getting
also
killed
right.
at half. I mean, that's a heck of a bounce back for a Michigan State team that before the game people were questioning whether or not they were going to be able to even be competitive with Kansas, and in fact they were. So that surprises me a little bit. That's a heck of a second half effort by Michigan State. Look at that, little college basketball.
I didn't think you were
Multi-talented.
serious. I still asked you your top 4 for the college football playoff. I guess we got both the bars. Gary, are you holding down with
Bama,
Georgia at number 4?
Clemson, Notre Dame, and just because you guys went Michigan at 4, I'll go Georgia at 4, Michigan outside looking in, just because I'll be wrong.
So there's the refresher. Me and Fitz had the same top 4. We had Bama, Clemson, Notre Dame, and Michigan, with Georgia and Oklahoma just in the outside looking in. Gary flipping the script, going Georgia in at 4, Michigan, then I assume Oklahoma also at 6 for you?
Yes, I wash my hands, though, of any responsibility if I look like an idiot and these are wrong. However, if I'm right, do I win anything other than your respect, which I'm trying to claw at right now?
Yeah, listen, you can argue. My respect means very little. You can tell. I mean,
still want it.
Yeah,
still need it.
It's we're buying low right now
Foss
on
is
my
about to show us some
respect.
stuff. No,
Yeah.
he's not.
I love that. Does Citadel get in if they beat Bama? I get it. Keep making your point. Like, congratulations, Bama has to play Citadel, and that sucks. That sucks for college football fans because nobody wants to watch it, and it's going to stink. It sucks for everybody, but you know what? Realistically, it is what it is, and they're still the best team in the country. So they're going to whoop up on Citadel the same way. No offense, Mike. They'll whoop up on Notre Dame in the playoff.
How dare you?
I'm just saying.
It is a weird place. And we did this show last year where, because of how dominant Alabama is, this feels less fun, right?
Yeah.
Wait. Bama's last 4 games are all at home as well?
That can't be true.
Am I reading this right? Or excuse me, last 3. Excuse me. Yeah.
No, yeah, they are. No,
Mississippi
the
State, Citadel,
last 4.
Auburn.
Well, no, the last 3 are all at home. Yeah, the
last
SEC
3 and
title
then
games in
obviously
Atlanta.
SEC title,
Yeah,
neutral,
their
but-
last 3 are all home games.
Oh, see, that's
now they. Well, I mean,
that's
they
not
did have 3 of their last 4 on the road, and those were all conference games too. So,
But let's also acknowledge that through this process, it is likely that Alabama not only beat the number 3 team in the country 29-0. They're going to have the opportunity to beat either the number 4 or 5 team, according to the committee, and they're going to beat Georgia every bit as bad to me. So when they get to the SEC championship game,
that one becomes the one. I don't know if we can write off as a foregone conclusion. Georgia's team changed a lot from last year, but I don't know if Georgia gets healthy up front, man. The game that Georgia lost to LSU was a game where Georgia was banged up front. It was the perfect storm against LSU and what they do up front with that team. Georgia gets a little bit healthier up front. Jake Fromm's a quarterback who's been there. He's got the benefit of having beaten this Alabama team already and getting obviously to that championship moment and going up against the rest of that Alabama team that, Tua, came in the second half and did some things, but they were still right there. They've got the benefit of knowing they can hang with these dudes.
And that is fair. I think one of the things that really stood out to me in the Kentucky game, I expected Georgia to thump Kentucky. I didn't expect Georgia to outrun Kentucky and to stop Benny Snell to the level that they did. So I do have to give Georgia some love because the weakness going in was Georgia can't stop the run. And then they made Snell really irrelevant to the game. And instead, they just pounded the ball down Kentucky's throat, which also surprised me. So I want to give Georgia some real credit for that.
Well, and Georgia on the other side, I think, has the versatility on offense to be able to do it because the one thing we always hear is your offense kind of has to be a balance between, you want to do your thing, and you also want to keep Bama's offense off the field. As much as we talk about what Jake Fromm and DeAndre Swift and Holyfield can do for Georgia, it still pales in comparison to Alabama by almost any statistical measure. So part of it is you've got to kind of keep them off the field, and at least having that dominant 1-2 punch in the run game can help you do that.
Now, we haven't even had a conversation in this process about Clemson. And I'm wondering if we're just there's a little piece of all of us that have just resigned to Clemson's just doing Clemson things, and it's fine. I mean, let's face it, they put up 77 points last week?
They put up 77 against Louisville.
I know, but it looked like they could have gotten to 100.
Who's ranked below 100 on total offense and total defense. They're one of the few college football teams in America that can lay claim to that.
I mean, it is staggering.
They are horrific.
Bobby Petrino's got to be sitting there saying, man, anybody want, he's calling Auburn at this point. He's like, hey, I'll come over there. Bobby Petrino wants out of Louisville. He's got nothing in the cupboard to play with.
No, but Clemson is interesting because you're right. Defensively, we know well what the commodity is. It's how much do we trust Trevor Lawrence on offense? And really, up front for me is where I have my worries about Clemson because especially after seeing what Alabama's D-line is capable of, Clemson's got a good college offensive line. But schematically, they're vulnerable. These are spread runs, and Etienne has a great yard per carry. I mean, Clemson's one of the best rushing teams in college football, but there's a difference when you see the dogs up front. NC State's probably the best defensive front I think they've faced so far has Clemson. And even then, that's a team that lost basically their entire defensive line from last year to the NFL, so they're all new starters. There feels like a difference based on what we saw from Alabama and that front seven against LSU that aren't slouches up front, but I don't think Clemson's markedly better than them.
I think the announcers on the game last week also made a really good point about Trevor Lawrence, somebody that's not particularly protecting himself well against taking hits. And when you've had a concussion, when you've had some of the injuries, when you've missed some plays, when you've had whatever the next shoulder thing is, I'd like to see Trevor Lawrence protect himself a little bit better because every single time he goes out, the conversation is now they don't have a backup at all. They don't have anybody that can protect him. And look, there's not a lot on that schedule left ahead of them. Boston College, Duke, South Carolina are 3 games that they should be able to win pretty handily at this point. And I think we're all accepting that Clemson is the second best team in the country. The question is that second best enough to really challenge with Alabama?
Absolutely. I mean, because we mentioned, the players there and the ones who won the national championship obviously aren't there anymore, but the the constant in all of this is Dabo. He's done it before. If there's a formula and if there's a coach who can see these little vulnerabilities that Alabama might have, which they're minuscule, it's Dabo. I mean, and, we talk about being the freshman quarterback. He's having the conversation with Treavor, especially when they're going to be in the college football playoff, we assume, if all goes as it's supposed to. So he's probably going to take him aside. If he hasn't already, be like, yo, the ultimate goal is to get to Bama, so we're going to have to keep you healthy. And you were saying it last week. I mean, their offense with ATN getting a lot of the carries and eating a bulk of the yardage is sort of built that way, throwing all those outs, just get it, get out, 10-yard outs, boom, 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 and just stay upright. So that way you're not taking the beating, so you have that opportunity to maybe crack them again.
Yeah, well, so I look at it like this. You're right. They made the move to Trevor Lawrence because they believed he was the upside beat Bama play. Like, Kelly Bryant got you there last year, but it wasn't good enough. And so Dabo looked at this situation kind of, I think, in the same way Notre Dame did with Brandon Wimbush, which is Brandon Wimbush won you a lot of games last year and you were 3-0 with him this year. But we see where this all goes, and we need more from that position. And so Notre Dame makes the move to Ian Book, and Clemson makes the move to Trevor Lawrence, who is an otherworldly college football talent. But it's, can he overcome those growing pains along the way in a longer sample size? Like, you brought Tua in for a half last year, and he balled out in there. And we had heard all these great things about him, but you wonder how that bears out if he's just a freshman going through that over the course of the season. For Trevor, we're getting to see all that, so we get more exposure to him. And that's, I think, what gives us a little doubt.
It looks like we're getting the playoffs. The rankings are coming out. I've got it here on my phone. This is what we're doing. Like, you're watching us on your phone. We're watching everything on our phones, trying to keep up with it. I haven't seen 25 through 20. I've missed that. So I'm just going to take everybody from 16.
I can give you 25 through 20. It's Washington at 25, Auburn at 24, Fresno State at 23, Iowa State at 22, Iowa at 21, Penn State drops down to number 20.
Wow.
That's where things get interesting. Penn State at number 20, you just mentioned. And then do you have the next?
I have Texas at 19, Michigan State at 18, which is important for Michigan. You think strength of schedule. Michigan State and Penn State both still ranked. Boston College at 17, who Clemson plays this week. Mississippi State, who Alabama's got left on the schedule. Florida falls down to 15. NC State at 14. Syracuse up to 13, which we know is the toughest game left for Notre Dame on their schedule. UCF checks in at 12.
UCF doesn't move.
UCF doesn't move. Kentucky drops from 9 down to 11.
That's
wow. If that doesn't tell you what the committee thinks of UCF, and I told you, played a close game against Temple. That was a game they could have lost.
So, again, what the committee is telling you is that a 2-loss Kentucky team is better in their minds than
UCF.
That hurts.
A 2-loss Kentucky team. And to your point you mentioned earlier, we cannot sleep on Syracuse. This Syracuse-Notre Dame game becomes incredibly key. Ohio State is the beginning of our top 10. Ohio State coming in at number 10 at this point. So if you're just tuning in.
So Ohio State holding steady where they were last week also.
Right? Okay,
right. So rankings reaction, hashtag rankings reaction to get in on it. We are getting these. We're giving them to you just as we're getting them. Again, we'll give you 15 through 10 again. 15 is Florida. 14 is NC State. 13 is Syracuse. 12, UCF. They do not move. Kentucky falls to 11 after getting their butts whooped by Georgia. Ohio State stays where they are at 10. So a little bit of a statement by the committee. And also, to your point, Mike, it shows us there are some statement games left here.
All right, so number 9, we got West Virginia. West Virginia, who was 13th last week, jumps up to number 9 now. So as we get down towards the end of the season, this is all about building that stock up for the West Virginia-Oklahoma game.
Well, and that's what I'm looking at here. West Virginia-Oklahoma, again, what the Big 12 needs is for one of those teams, because the Big 12, number 1 versus number 2, plays in the conference championship game. West Virginia and Oklahoma are going to play each other. Likely then we'll play in the Big 12 championship. When that happens, I think they need the same team to win both of those games, and they need both of those games to be great. They need both of those games to be so good that you're not downplaying the opponent and you can upsell whoever wins.
Well, and Oklahoma would also be on the road against West Virginia in that first one, which is noteworthy and gets credit. Washington State, number 8.
And by the way, we still haven't seen LSU. So that tells you something about what they think about the committee. Committee thinks something about Bama.
Yeah.
You lose 29-0 at home, and you are still at least in the top 7. So
Washington State doesn't move. LSU at 7.
LSU at 7? Do we have that? Is that
LSU at 7.
LSU at 7.
They dropped
so you
4
lose
spots.
29-0 at home on a Saturday night, and you only fall to 7. That tells you how good Bama is. I mean,
That's wild.
Woo!
That's wild.
Wow.
Woo! So again, let me get you through this. We'll get you all the way from the top 25 as they reset. You're just tuning in. Hashtag rankings reaction. Mike Golic Jr., Jason Fitz, our guest host this week. Gary Streisky hanging out with us. Mike Foss is in the kitchen keeping us informed as it goes. At 25, we have Washington. 24, Auburn. 23, Fresno State. 22, Iowa State. 21, Iowa. 20, Penn State. Anybody have any great surprises there?
No, nothing really the surprise there. For me, if you're a Michigan fan, keeping those teams in the back half of the top 25, them winning out matters for your strength of schedule this year, because if they disappear all of a sudden, when you look back, all you see is a bunch of now unranked teams.
The next group of 5 we have going in, Texas at 19, Michigan State at 18, which is much higher than I would have thought they would be. Boston College at 17, Mississippi State at 16, Florida at 15. So Florida gets their butt kicked by Mizzou and only falls to 15. That surprises me a little bit, guys.
Yep, they fall down 4 spots from that initial 11 ranking. So that one becomes interesting. Boston College has the matchup against Clemson this weekend, so now that's potentially another ranked win on the schedule for Clemson.
Yeah, and note that you haven't heard yet from 2 of the big losses. So NC State 14, Syracuse 13, UCF stays put at 12, and Kentucky at 11. We've already said it. I'm surprised, particularly surprised that UCF is sitting at 12, which puts them barely on the edge of New Year's 6, right? I mean, that's a surprise to me.
UCF didn't move at all. NC State jumped 7 spots from 21 to 14. Now, that shows you what happens to some of the other teams along the way that lost in between them and what kind of a reaping of a weekend it was. But, wow, that kind of jump, and UCF stagnant.
So at number 10, we have Ohio State. Number 9, West Virginia. West Virginia gets up to number 9. That's big for the Big 12. Washington State still standing tall as the Pac-12's best shot at the playoff at 8. LSU falls from number 3 to number 7. That's a fall, Gary, but that's not the fall I think a lot of us
I thought
expected.
West Virginia would be in front of Washington State, to be honest, especially the way they won at Texas, going for the 2-point conversion, winning. I thought that they would at least be ahead of Washington State, so that one actually surprises me. I think I mentioned I thought they'd be like 7, 8.
We've got the top 4 starting to roll in here. Alabama checks in at number 1, no surprise to anybody. Clemson checks in at number 2, also no surprise to anybody.
So this is where we start to get a little bit curious.
Here
We're
we
going to
go.
see. We all know what these are going to be, and I think we have the top 6 coming in strong at this point. Guys in the booth, by the way, doing a great job on this show. We really appreciate it. And we got Alabama 1, we got Clemson 2. Notre Dame is number 3.
Okay.
And then number 4 is Michigan. So we now know Michigan is number 4.
So no surprise.
I think we're all expecting, Georgia comes in
got
at number
Georgia.
5. See, Georgia at number 5, which means Oklahoma sits at number 6. Okay, so again, Alabama 1, Clemson 2, Georgia 3, Michigan 4.
What are you talking
Sorry,
about?
Alabama 1, Clemson 2,
How dare
Notre
you?
Dame 3. I can't read. Notre Dame 3, Michigan 4, Georgia 5, Oklahoma 6, LSU 7, Washington State 8. That gets you your top 8. So you see the 6 in front of you. And guys, I don't think there's a big surprise there, do you?
No, that was exactly what you and I predicted, and I know Gary kind of went out on a limb just because we had both predicted the same thing over here. This is about, based on the way it shook out, what we knew, and based off what we know for the schedules the next couple of weeks, we don't anticipate it changing. Like, the best shot we've got at this weekend is BC upsetting Clemson. BC, who now checks in all the way up at number 17.
17, and they were 18 last week, so...
BC last week was 22.
22, okay, gotcha.
Well, and realistically, the next piece of this is who wins out. If you win out, who controls their own destiny in my mind? Because I will say this. If Michigan wins out from today on and Georgia wins out from today on, including conference championship games, Georgia will go to the playoff. If Georgia beats Alabama, Georgia's going to the playoff.
Yeah,
that's a better win than Michigan can get.
That becomes it. So If it holds serve, and I mean, so it's going to matter what Kentucky does down the stretch in Washington State, because if Washington State and Oklahoma and Georgia can all hold serve down the stretch, now it's who faults first. Because the higher Ohio State gets in that, the more that becomes viable for them and for Michigan going down. Because now what you've got is you've got Oklahoma at 7, and you've got Oklahoma at 7, and where's West Virginia checking?
No, we got Oklahoma at 6.
Oklahoma at 6, sorry, and West Virginia at 9. So you've got the potential to see what would essentially be a top 10 matchup twice to end the season, which, God, that's got to mean something.
But here's the shame on it. I mean, realistically, if we're talking about that exact scenario, Oklahoma goes in. Let's say Oklahoma wins both those games, right? Oklahoma wins out. In this imaginary scenario, Oklahoma wins out. They're not going to jump a Michigan team that wins out or a Georgia team that wins out.
But they get in if Michigan loses in the Big Ten. Let's just say that.
If Michigan loses in the Big Ten and Georgia loses in the SEC championship game,
Oklahoma's
Oklahoma
in
gets
if
in.
they win out.
Well, I think, at this rate, you're right. Listen, it's all predicated on what happens with the SEC, right? That's the beginning and end of this, is what happens in the SEC. But if the SEC only gets one team in and Michigan loses to Ohio State, Oklahoma's getting in if they win out.
That'd be fantastic, because Kyler Murray is the best athlete in college football, and it'd be incredible just to watch him ball, even though they'd lose in whatever bowl game.
I think Oklahoma could put up points on virtually anybody, right?
That's a fact.
I mean, Oklahoma can put points on Bama.
Oklahoma can put points on Bama, they can't stop anybody.
Right.
And again, like that's the problem. And it's not like Ohio State's defense has been great either, but Dwayne Haskins has quietly been throwing more touchdowns than anyone else that we're talking about through the majority of this season. That's an offense that we know can put up points, and that's a defense that has a better chance of stopping than Oklahoma's. Oklahoma's, who has shown no real wherewithal to do that, I think already changed D coordinators on the season, but has offensive weapons like it's going out of style. Like CeeDee Lamb and Trey Sermon, who wasn't even the starting running back this year, are juggernauts, even against, I'd assume even against an Alabama defense as great as it is.
So if you're just tuning in, the College Football Playoff Rankings Reaction Show, again, Mike Golic Jr., Jason Fitz. Usually we do this every Tuesday from 8 to 9 p.m. after the rankings have come out. This week we were a little later because the committee was later getting the rankings out to us. Gary Streisky, our guest co-host, Mike Foss, keeping it down in the kitchen. And I want to go back. You see the graphic. You see who's there and who's on the outside looking in. Just to give everybody essentially the top 12, because I think the committee has really spoken in their top 12. Number 12 is UCF. They did not move. Number 11 is Kentucky. So Kentucky takes a bad loss to Georgia, becomes a 2-loss team. They are still ahead of UCF. Ohio State comes in at 10, West Virginia at 9, Washington State at 8, LSU at 7. Then we get to the top 6, which played out exactly as most of us expected. Oklahoma 6, Georgia 5, Michigan 4, Notre Dame 3, Clemson 2, Alabama at number 1.
And someone just commented on here, we appreciate everyone that's watching along with us on Twitter. Someone commented on there that Ohio State is in the same situation as Michigan if they went out. No, they are not, because Michigan has the best loss of anyone in the country right now, and Ohio State got that you-know-what beat by Purdue. Yeah. They got beat by double digits in that game, so those are not one-loss teams that are built the same.
Yeah, the committee's going to look at the strength of your wins and the weakness of your loss, and they will find a way to justify a close loss nobody expected. Like, they'll just find a way to turn around and say, oh, my God, how did that happen? Bad Saturday. But a blowout loss is absolutely, I mean, we've never seen a team get blown out, right, and make the playoff?
Well, no, that has not happened. And you look at the other scenarios, right, where things have been excused away. When Kelly Bryant goes down last year and Clemson loses to Syracuse, they say, well, you didn't have your starting quarterback for the second half of that game. Even when Penn State got waxed by Michigan, you could look at that and say, well, they were down all of their linebackers. That was a really injured unit. But even that wasn't enough to overcome that blowout. And it happened to Ohio State last year. It happened to Penn State that year. We've just seen it too often to believe that they would treat Ohio State and a Michigan team who you already have half the people thinking that Michigan's better than the Notre Dame team that beat them head-to-head. So if you were to actually have to have them leverage the strength of that loss, it would be the most valuable currency in college football.
Yeah, and look, I don't disagree that Ohio State's a good football team, but they have an inexcusable loss on their resume. I don't think that there's any way that Ohio State gets into the playoff, even if they went out. They don't control their own destiny to that level. Too many teams ahead of them would have to lose. I think the most interesting thing between 6 and 10 is what can happen to Oklahoma, because Oklahoma has the chance to pick up 2 incredible two incredibly powerful wins if they can turn around and sweep West Virginia. The same can be said for West Virginia. I mean, frankly, West Virginia turns around, beats Oklahoma twice. But it's going to be hard to leapfrog in my mind all the way from 9 up to 4.
You're right. We start to look at this too, and you think about some of the bowl games you could get out of this, because LSU's sitting at 7. They're going to be in a very good bowl. They finished on the season at Arkansas, home versus Rice, and at Texas A&M. And A&M could give them a game. Like Texas A&M has been a team that has flirted at times with looking like a competent outfit with Jimbo Fisher in his first year. But man, that one to me is staggering how far they didn't fall. Coming off of an Alabama, not just a win, but a dominant performance.
And that is also a reminder, boys, in my mind, no matter, even if Bama loses a game and everybody will flip out,
They're still in.
Bama's still in. I mean, this is the committee telling you.
In what fashion?
I mean, right. Yeah, correct. If they get blown out, that you're absolutely right. But if they lose a kick six type game, if Auburn finds a way for a miracle in the Iron Bowl, Alabama's still going to be in.
Well, and so we talk about injury too, and Gary, you mentioned this before, that the only thing that really livens this situation up is that health of Tua's knee, because the one thing we also found out in that Alabama game is that when Tua went out, Jalen Hurts didn't come running in. Jalen Hurts and that ankle are not okay right now. And so the health of both of your quarterbacks becomes paramount in that situation, right? Like that's something to keep an eye on down the stretches. They've made a living this year on not playing Tua in the fourth quarter and getting Jalen in there. Well, now that health is even in question, and you got a backup quarterback that's a little nicked up, I mean, what happens then? Like, then you really get to hit the panic switch, but that's the kind of thing that we have to look out for at this point, because if he's on the field, we're screwed.
I do love this question, guys. If Notre Dame loses, do they get in, Gary?
If they lose to 13th now ranked Syracuse, probably not. I would say no.
That's going to be
just because there's too much chaos going at 5, 6, 7, too much stuff going on at 5, 6, 7. Especially, we keep coming back to it. If Oklahoma takes care of business twice against number 9 West Virginia.
Yeah, and I keep looking, Mike, and I'm looking at 5, 6, 7. I feel like this year, particularly, the battle for the 4 seed is going to include incredible football teams. It'll be amazing to me if Oklahoma gets into that 4 seed, because I think Oklahoma-Alabama could be a fun game.
Notre Dame, if they lose a game, would not get in because they wouldn't have a chance to have a win that would erase that bad taste. All the rest of these teams, for the most part, have games coming up down the stretch that we've talked about where, with a blemish on their resume, they've got a chance to at least erase that at the end of the season with a big win in a conference championship setting, potentially over a ranked opponent. Notre Dame would not have that left. Even getting a win against number 13 Syracuse, if they were to somehow lose to Florida State this weekend or win all those and then lose to SC on the road at the end of the year, I don't think would be enough to overcome. And that's where the double-edged sword of not having a conference championship comes into play for a team that caliber.
Y'all can follow Gary on Twitter at Gary Streisky, at Mike Golic, M Golic Jr. 57. One day I'll learn your Twitter.
One day, not today.
At M Golic Jr. 57 to follow Mike. I'm at Jason Fitz. Mike, what are you at? The Mike Foss? Is it? Was there another Mike Foss?
There's some guy in Detroit.
We don't talk about him no more.
At the Mike Foss for the other Mike Foss there. Hey, it's taken a whole village to put this show together. We appreciate everybody. Remember, we're here every single Tuesday, usually from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern. Hang out with us next Tuesday as the committee acts. We always react. Thanks for watching the College Football Playoff Rankings Reaction Show.
Did your voice crack?
Yeah. Puberty.
Man, it's great.
I want to be